It's time for Cutting Edge Consciousness with Freeman Michaels and Barnet Bain. Thought-provoking discussions and bold ideas from the edge of possibility.
Welcome to Cutting Edge Consciousness. This is Freeman Michaels here
with Barnet Bain.
So great to be back from the other side. I don't know. From wherever we were before we started this.
Before.
Yeah. It's great to be back here talking to you.
It is so much better to be back. It's good to be here now, isn't it? It's good to be in the moment. It's it's great to be present.
I want to talk about keeping score.
Let's do it. Let's keep score.
You and I, a long time ago, brought up this idea of keeping score. And there was an event recently that illustrated how insipid.
What we mean by that, even.
It illustrates it. Thank you. It illustrates what we mean by that. It illustrates this concept of keeping score.
This stealth, disintegrated observer that is has an agenda and is constantly toting up points. One for me, that's one for the world, that's one for somebody else. That's what I'm down one, I'm up one, I'm ahead two.
Who's winning and who's losing?
Three.
I mean, literally, that's what it's bent on. It's bent on who's the winner and who the loser is.
Yeah.
And so what happened is this, and I'll tell the story, and Barnett, you can correct me when I'm wrong. Nearly,
You're gonna be wrong?
Well, I hope not. A little less than, let's say, a year ago.
Yeah.
I invited you. I was going to do this thing called Moth Story Slam. The Moth is who sponsors it, and it's a storytelling event that is aired on public radio stations.
Yeah.
In Los Angeles, it's KCRW, but it's across the country, and there's several of them. There's one in New York City. There's one in Chicago. Anyhow, there's one in L.A. And people get up and tell stories, 5-minute stories, basically, true stories.
Brutally hip.
Brutally hip. Well, now you're kind of jumping ahead of the story. How do we know it's brutally hip?
I just heard.
All right, look, I did it. I did it. I invited you to do it. Your first answer was, "Oh, that's interesting." And then after that, I never heard from you again. Then you ducked out.
Brutally hip.
Completely.
I don't have enough black wardrobe.
Even
this is not black enough.
Black T-shirt with a black sports coat and
not black enough.
Black boots and black pants. Let's get to the story. So I did this. I got up and told this story, and I did it 3 times. Recently, you were invited to give a talk or whatever it was, and you were saying, this public speaking thing, I'm starting to do it. I like it. And, this one's slightly different. And I said, why don't you do the story slam? Initially I said with me, thinking I was going to do it with you. But then I ducked out. See how it works? And you and I, this was one evening we were writing up in Idlewild. And so we sat down to see if we could write a story. Like, what would that look like? And we had so much fun. Like, it was delightful.
Yeah,
we wrote this fantastic, fun story, which is a true story of your life. We basically just, sort of rearranged it and sort of figured out what pieces were important, and we came up with a story. So we went to the Moth thing a couple weeks ago, and you put your hat in the ring, as it were. They collect a certain, because not everyone gets to go. Some nights everyone gets to go, but it depends how many people want to do it.
Fortified with adult beverages.
Right.
I threw my hat in my name in the hat.
Right. We juiced you up a little, and you threw your name in the hat, but you didn't get to go. But the next week they do it again, a different place.
Next week you called up again. You said, "Well,"
yeah, I said, let's do it again. So we went down there and you did it, and it was. Well, we have different experiences of what it was. I thought it was absolutely brilliant.
I was out of the body.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is you got called to go first, which is complicated because whoever goes first. See, you didn't know this. I probably should have cued you in, but I didn't expect you to go first. The person who goes first usually doesn't get very good scores. They score it, by the way. They literally score it. So, you are, in essence, I guess, performing. You are. There's, a couple hundred people there, and they're judging you, and they're giving a score, and you get a score. So you went first. You got called to go first, and you got up, and your scores were pretty abysmal. But not...
Boy,
well,
now the truth comes out.
They weren't good. They weren't that good.
They weren't that great.
However, your speech, your story was brilliant. I mean, it was really brilliant. And it's funny because both the host and the sound guy were both like, hey, that's a good story, folks. Wait a minute. That's a really good story. Because, again, a lot of folks don't know. Like, it's the beginning. What's a good story? Well,
I warmed up the room.
That's right.
Somebody warmed up the room.
That's it.
Would have, from that perspective, it might have been easier a little farther in. But it was exciting. It was challenging. it was way out of my comfort zone, way out of my comfort zone. And that was thrilling to actually break through that, really thrilling. And I saw something in myself that I had never become that, that I'd never been able to embrace to that degree.
What was that?
I saw the... what's the name of what's the title of this? See how in denial I am?
Keeping score.
I saw how much I keep score. I saw
so much denial.
I was ever denial. I saw the degree to which I keep score.
Yeah, because you sat down and
every subsequent
person I saw you like slouch a little more because they got better scores than you.
They kept getting better scores.
Well, the next person after you got about the same scores. I think it was actually the exact same scores. So that piece of the puzzle was similar.
But the bigger piece was I became very aware that I was robbing myself of the bigger treasure of having blown through this enormous obstacle and having had really a lot of fun doing it.
Yeah.
It was as scary as it was. It was a lot of fun to do that, and so much so that I'm going to do it again.
Yay!
It was a lot of fun, but I robbed myself of some of that experience because there was this part of me that was judging, well, how well did I do? Is that person scoring better than me? And most of them did. Or worse than me, and then I would be all thrilled. Or the same, and then I wouldn't feel as challenged. And I saw the degree to which I keep score, and that I am preoccupied with my competitiveness. Am I looking good? Am I looking less good? Am I going to be humiliated? Am I going to be embarrassed? Am I going to... How well do I appear to outside authorities? So this is...
And who do you make the authority? Like, who do you allow to be the authority?
Everyone.
Right. It's so interesting, too, because if I can describe... There's an element of the Moth experience. There's a lot of... I'm going to say there's an underlying desperation that I often experience of people trying to get seen. Because this is Hollywood, right? And so it's very...
Because it's mostly...
young people.
Actors.
Yeah,
It's
a lot
pretty
of
much
actors.
young people, and they're mostly 20s, 30s, 40s, starts getting older.
20s, 30s.
I was definitely seasoned, pickled. I was actually there in my next life, as a matter of fact. But they're mostly young and largely very talented, and a number of them are looking to make an impression. But frankly, I realize so is I.
That's right.
So it's an extraordinary mirror. It's all such an extraordinary mirror.
And it was interesting afterwards. I was telling you about, reminding you of even when we were writing it, I was telling you that this is a brilliant story. Realize it's less about trying to do what would be successful at the Moth and more about doing artistically what's an expression of you. And so we knew writing this that it wasn't really lined up to be the perfect Moth story, but it was perfect for you. And I mean, I have to tell you, watching it, and I've said this so many times, it was so moving because it's a really human story. I mean, that's the piece we haven't even talked about it, but it's this incredible story of your experience. I don't know. It's great. So that said, I was just glowing as your friend watching you do this. And then I was even glowing a bit as I watched you spin, because the opportunity then to talk about, and by spin I mean energetically kind of spin out. I watched you come back and kind of be confused. And the funniest thing is I've been there. I've gotten up and done it and had to go back to a table and wonder, okay, how am I? And the interesting part is a couple times I did it and no one was with me. I was by myself. Or the first time I was by myself. The second time, the next two times I had people with me. So that was even weirder. But then coming back and like trying to figure out what was that. Is that any good? Mm-hmm. Of course, some number of weeks later, I got the tape. I actually ordered the tape, the videotape it, and was able to watch it and go, oh, okay, I see what I did and have a sense of it. But
Maybe we'll put up the tape.
That would be fantastic. I could put on tape some more too.
We'll do it at some point.
Yeah.
We'll do it at some point.
After you see it. Let me judge it. Let me score it first.
Let me score it and see if I look good. If I look good, I'll share it with you all.
That's right. It's such a brilliant illustration.
Not that I'm keeping score.
Such a brilliant.
Not that I'm afraid you won't love me, but just in case.
Oh, it's so great. Let me go on to another part of this, because one of the other parts, which was really interesting, is the folks who sat down at our table.
Oh my goodness!
So the way the tables are set up, you have like a table buddy. It's not like everyone has their own table. In fact, if you sit,
you're lucky if you have your own plate.
That's right. She kept taking your chips. Anyhow, this nice young couple sat next to us, and so we struck up a conversation. And we both got triggered again by this couple in various ways. Now, we have to change their names for the sake of the show. So let's call him Bob, and let's call her Susie, though neither of them was a Bob and a Susie. But let's go with that, Bob and Susie. And
tell me about Bob.
So let me go back to something we say, which is every time we find ourselves judging someone, we say something about someone like that person's is a needy, dented can.
And we have the add-on, which is,
and so am I,
and so am I,
and so am I. But we forgot that night. Not totally, because I think we had it in the back of our brains. But in talking to them, we were having a nice time, and they were friendly. And then at some point, it came up that we had this show that we did. And he's a philosophy professor. We won't say the university. That we slipped in Bob, the professor from some university. And so then he asked us about our show, and we sort of explained what our show is about. And that wasn't in line with his worldview at all. In fact,
just dismissed it.
Oh, more than dismissed it. He said it's complete junk and nonsense, and I mean, just
not consistent with any credible philosophical worldview.
Well, but there it is. See, it comes up. And so what Barnet and I started doing was slamming him with names of philosophical thinker people, and he didn't know what we were talking about. And then he sort of said to us, he said, in academia, we really write for each other. He slipped on that. I don't think he meant to say that, but that's the truth. Like, it isn't something you write to become a bestseller. You're not trying to write for a larger population. You're trying to
publish or perish.
You're working within a bubble of academia. I know this because my brother's a professor and his wife are a professor, and they have their own world, and they do their own conferences. And I'm like, well, when do I get to read this? And he was basically saying, you don't. This is what we do. We share these things with each other, which is fine. I'm not dismissing that. But what was fascinating is how I felt myself, and I'll just claim it, reacting to him. Because his insecurity, which was being expressed as arrogance or defensiveness or whatever, was... And then my desire to crush him or to test him or to in some way shame him for, basically saying, I don't like what you do, as opposed to saying, Freeman, you're great. It's fascinating because it was measured, but it was palpable. I mean, like I could taste it in the back of my mouth. It was like it was there, that this guy, that there's a part of me that wanted to go after him. And then in talking to her and the whole way that she was sort of explaining herself, and the whole thing was so, when I look at it from a place of compassion, it's so, and so am I. And so am I.
Yeah, I could see myself in it. I mean, there is this, it's almost not quite an archetype, but it's almost cliche enough to be an archetype of the little professor.
Yes.
Type.
Yeah.
And I know that I carry a lot of that little professor energy, and certainly, especially when I was little. And so here we were at the table with this little professor who was so running this energy of needing to be loved for what he knew and for being authoritative about it.
That's right.
And I'm sitting across the table needing to be loved for my performance. It was just this marriage made in some kind of deep, compassionate hall of wacky mirrors.
That's exactly right. Oh, so it was a pretty special experience. And the funny part was not just the evening, because we did a beautiful job of kind of processing it out on the sidewalk, where your car was parked down the street. But we also the next day picked up the pieces in a really beautiful way, because the humanity of the whole thing, the whole human drama, in the way it played out, in a way that we could point to it and say, remember when that happened? I mean, like, I just am thinking now that we've told the story and we missed so many pieces that you and I picked up the next day about the nuances of the whole experience. Because the next day I had said to you, I said, Barnett, that was really, really good. And then somewhere shortly after that you said, but everyone got a better score than I did.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And you couldn't hear that was really good.
You said so beautifully, wow, you're still holding that.
You're still keeping score.
And I thought, oh my goodness, that's how
stealth, how underlying.
It's so woven in,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. It's at the level of evidence. It's surfaced. It's bubbled up enough that I can discern it. I can spot it. I can own it. I can forgive it. I can release it. And when it comes up again, I can do the same all over again. But it's no longer submarine. It's no longer lurking there below where I'm just playing it out. And that's exciting.
Yes,
and glorious.
liberating.
And I feel free of something.
Let me reflect it, because this is the work you and I have been doing very consciously together. I mean, we've been talking about integration for a year now on this show, and it's really been something where we're working on our own integration, the integration of these disowned aspects of us that leak out and wreak havoc. And it gets projected onto people or situations, right? Or world events. We find some crisis in the world to attach our fears to, and then we ride that, and we become obsessed with that, and that becomes what we point to. And there's this real inclination. We see this with people we love. I mean, people in the thought leader world who are friends of ours, who are trying to save the world because of some personal piece of them that's not integrated. And so it's expressed out, which is fine, except that it has to be owned and integrated. That's the level at which things change. Without being too specific, because you and I talked about this recently, we pointed to something and said, wow, the intention, I get it, it's sweet, but then it's missing the point of personal ownership. It's making it a world event and trying to say we all need to heal. No. You need to heal. And then when you heal and I heal and the guy next to me heals, we'll be fine. We can meet over the fact that this is what we're working on, but not from the vantage point of trying to make it to
dissociate from it. And
right. Even by making it a cause or making a movement. Don't do that. Make it a personal expression that you're seeing reflected back in your global experience. Your collective, my collective, is reflecting back to me certain things. This happened. I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm not. This happened when a person we know said something about an event that we had no idea happened, but we get why that information came into them. In other words, that was their bent in the world. And how could we not know about that? I got a buddy who's really into the dingoes and saving the dingoes, which is fine. I think dingoes should be saved. That sounds great, but it's not my thing. But he's so invested. But it's the wounded dog in him. It's the neglected. It's the feeling like an alien that gets expressed as, let's save the dingoes. And it's constant. It never ends for this guy. And it's too much. I mean, I have to hide him on Facebook because I can't hear about the dingoes every day, even though I love him. He's a wonderful man, but he's pushing the dingoes. And if he's listening to this, I'm sorry, I just outed it. But the truth is, it's something that's really important, that we recognize this is us. This is that we own it. And then it's really okay still to stay with the cause. It's not to give up the cause and the dingoes. It's fine. But that there's a personal ownership of why it's such a hook for me. Going back, the piece I was going to tell you about is these people who trigger me. And I'm really aware and really owning how I get triggered. I'm just owning it. And it is such a relief, because the making it about them at this point in my life so doesn't work for me. And in releasing that and saying, wow, this is me, it's a relief like I never knew. So every layer of relieving the burden, every layer of self-forgiveness, of letting go of the judgment, of letting go of the position. We had that wonderful conversation with Chi-Lin about, letting go of our position and healing and tapping into our heart and going, wow, that's me, wow, that's me, wow, that's me, and dispelling each of these judgments one by one.
Beautifully said.
Putting down the scorecard.
Beautifully said. Nothing to add to that.
Nothing?
Not a thing.
That's beautiful. And with that, then, we're going to call it a day. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, we invite you to share it. We invite you to like us on our Facebook page because we're keeping score of how many people are liking us. That's funny.
I refuse to look.
That's good. That's one way to solve the issue. I get triggered every time I look. Why don't more people like us? No, we're kidding. Well, we are and we're not. We'd still like you to like us. And our...
We like you.
That's right.
Fair is fair, right?
I got to get on our website. Our website, www.cuttingedgeconsciousness.com. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye now.